name is Jo Egan. I was the artist in residence here in the Playhouse in 2018, where we developed the play The Crack in Everything. I've been asked to introduce Hector Aristizbal, and I'm going to just read from the programme his biog. With his company, Imagine Action, Hector Aristizbal has combined his practice as psychologist with his theatre experience to train psychosocial teams in the use of art for healing and reconciliation. After 28 years in exile, he has returned to his native Colombia, and with RECONECTANDO, he is working with ex-combatants from all groups and their victims, as well as community leaders, to accompany the work of the Truth Commission. I am honoured to share all that I learned in places like Northern Ireland while working with the Playhouse in using theatre for community dialogue. Hector was honoured with the prestigious Otto René Castillo Award for Political Theatre, and he is co-author with Diane Leifer of The Blessing Next to the Wound, a story of art, activism and transformation.
Hello, my name is Hector Aristizbal and I will be talking with you from Medellin, Colombia. I have been doing theater since I was in kindergarten. My kindergarten teacher taught us how to dance, how to play with puppets, how to put makeup, and she awoke that seed in me. It was then reawakened when I was in high school, and once I entered university, I have been doing theater ever since. But the theater that I have done has not only been on stage. Actually, for the last 20 years, I have done very few plays, except for a solo play. Yet I have directed many, many plays with communities in different parts of the world, including Northern Ireland. With the Playhouse, I had the honor to do 9 residencies in different parts of the community, both in Derry, Belfast, Letterkenny, and other communities around. And we used theater to create spaces for dialogue, but these were aesthetic dialogues. We used theater to create scenes about the problems that people were experiencing in their daily lives, regardless of their social background, regardless of their social status, regardless of their personal experience with the troubles. But we use theater to project on stage the issues that we didn't know how to resolve. And using mostly the methodology of Augusto Boal, we were able to engage in conversation with the communities or the audiences that we invited to this dialogue. This experience with the Playhouse trained me to work with many, many other communities around the world, especially in places of conflict and in places of post-conflict agreements. You know very well in Northern Ireland and in most places that I know that once war stops or the weapons get silenced, the conflict doesn't disappear. Actually, somehow war is an eclipse to all the other issues that are alive in the community. And that's also true about Colombia. But what I didn't know at the time that I was doing this work with the Playhouse and the work in places like Rwanda, Senegal, South Africa, Guatemala, Croatia, etc., I was training myself to one day be able to return to Colombia. For many, many years, that was an impossible thought. It wasn't even a thought for many, many years. But when the peace process began, the peace dialogue between FARC, the guerrilla FARC, the oldest guerrilla in the world, and the government of President Santos, and when I saw that this dialogue, contrary to 7 other attempts that had happened in our history, was going somewhere different, I decided to return to Colombia. I left this country when I was 28 years old. I was tired of burying friends, intellectuals, artists, not even leftist people, people who dared to think differently. They were being killed, tortured, disappeared. And it was too painful. And it was too painful and upsetting to just be waiting to be killed. So I decided to leave. And I left when I was 28 years old. and I was out of the country for 28 years. I wasn't counting. I realized this after one day when I returned. I noticed this geometry. I also noticed that when I was tortured when I was 22 years old, and when I was 44, I started doing a play called Nightwing, in which I tell my story of torture and the story of being kidnapped, horribly tortured and killed of my brother Juan Fernando. When I did that play, and this is another way that theater has played an important role in my personal life, I did it to honor the death of my brother and also to honor the people that were being tortured in the prison of Abu Ghraib in Iraq, where American soldiers took photographs of themselves as they were torturing their prisoners. And so I did the play, and somehow when I opened the chamber of torture, when I opened my personal nightmare and I shared it with the world in an aesthetic way, it opened the doors of the world for me. I did that play already in more than 54 countries and many cities. And the play also changed my life, because when I started traveling around the world, I was also able to share the work that I was doing at that time in Los Angeles, California, with different communities. So I somehow left my practice as a psychotherapist. I was also trained as a psychotherapist and worked for over 20 years as a therapist. But I left that training, even though I was doing very well, to start working with communities, mostly using theater. And at the beginning, I was working mostly with training psychosocial groups, therapists, artists, and other people who were interested in the use of art to work with very wounded communities. Here in Colombia, I was somehow born into a matrix of violence and a matrix of trauma. And unfortunately, that is true about most of the places that I had visited around the world. But in all of them, I have seen that the role of art and theater in specific is like a balm, is a medicine that we can use to work with communities. For me, arts are the modern way we call ritual. And ritual is somehow the place where humanity has always healed. It's the place where humanity come together to relate to each other the stories of their lives, and to resignify those stories through storytelling, through meetings around the fire, through dances, and obviously through rituals. Most rituals are inspired in the cycles of nature. Most rituals take place in this bigger womb, that is the womb of nature. One of the main things that we as human beings had been delusional about is that we are separated from nature, that we are above nature, that we are at the center of nature. I was trapped in that anthropocentric viewpoint. And since I returned to my country, I am now growing roots under my feet. I have somehow come back home, and now I am working on the land. I am planting my own food. Not all of it, but I am planting my own food. I am seeing the beauty and the resiliency of nature. This place was almost empty when I got here a year and a half ago, and now there is life all over because nature is resilient. Human nature, our souls are also resilient, and the main language of the soul is art. So art is, for me, it plays the role that the mycelium plays in nature. When a tree falls and it starts rotting, when an animal dies in a forest, it starts decomposing, and a fungus comes in and becomes a mycelium that extracts from that all the substances that can still serve life. Some of them become also the mushrooms, the beautiful mushrooms. There are more than 20,000 kinds of mushrooms. But the mycelium starts spreading whatever was alive in that part of nature that is dying. You know that death and life are constantly together in nature. I mean, and this will become nutrients for the next life that will come from this place. I think that art somehow plays that role. Art is like the mycelium of the soul. When we go through traumatic experiences, through difficult experiences, through massacres, through death, through displacement, and this is happening all over the world right now, art is what allows you to visit that wound, open the wound, and find the medicine, and find what in the wound can allow us to create meaning, what in the wound would allow us to survive, to continue serving life. Also, the wounded places are often the places where our gifts and our medicine hides. This is something that many authors, including Carl Jung, and many of the traditional cultures that I have been able to study have expressed, that all human beings come to the world carrying gifts, and we come to the world to give those gifts. However, we first need to learn how to survive in society. And we develop an ego, and it's important to develop a good ego, and we learn things, and we get PhDs, and we learn to do things in order to survive, but that's not who we are. The ego is not all that we are. Actually, the ego is a very small part of what we are. So the events in life are there to awaken those internal resources that we all have and that we had brought to life. In my personal life, as I shared before, I left the country. When I left this country of Colombia, I was horribly wounded. I was filled with anger, with hatred, with desire for revenge. I didn't want to return here. I was somehow aborted by my society. But during all these years, as I traveled the world and as I met people in other countries, people who thought that they were enemies, Hutus and Tutsis, loyalists, unionists, and Republicans. What was it that divided these brothers and sisters? And so working with them, I was able to ask myself, what is it that divides me from paramilitaries? Or what is it that divides me from guerrillas? Or from military people? For many years, I spent time in my soul and my heart hating them. But I was only damaging myself. I was only hurting myself. None of them, I think, were hurt because I was hating them, spending time hating them. Now, I am able to work with them. So I sit with paramilitaries and hear their stories. And their group was the one who kidnapped my brother, horribly tortured him, and killed him. I sit also with guerrilla men and women, and I hear their stories. And their group kidnapped many of my own relatives and many people in this country. I sit with military people, and their organization tortured me just for being a student and a theater person. But what I see is mostly peasants, mostly poor people who are used as the carne de cañón for the war. These are peasants killing each other. I've never seen a rich person or the sons and daughters of presidents or the people who promote war, they never send their kids to war. They benefit from war. War is a huge machine. So right now, art is that place that allows us to face the naked truth. I remember a story I recently heard. John Croft, the founder of Dragon Dreaming, which is another methodology that I like to use. And he told a story about the king who had two daughters. One was named Truth, and the other one was named Story. And Truth and Story were beautiful and brilliant and wise and very intelligent, but they were always competing with each other. So one day they decided to have a competition and said, let's go to town and see who attracts the most people. And Truth said, I will go first. And she, even before leaving, she got naked because she knew she was beautiful and she was irresistible. But when she came out, people ran away from her and people went into their homes. And if they looked behind the curtains. And Truth could not believe this. And she returned home and she was crying and she was very distressed. And her sister, Story, was very taken by that and said, what happened? And she said, people run away from me. And she couldn't understand what happened to her sister. She said, let's go, but let's go together. And when Naked Truth and Story came together, slowly people started gathering. Our truth in Colombia, like in most places that had suffered war, is very difficult to face. Most people don't want it. And it's not mostly the people who had suffered the most directly from the atrocities, from the massacres, from the displacement, from losing everything. But it's the people who witnessed, who saw this happening and didn't do anything, who were afraid or who wanted to convince themselves ideologically that there was something necessary. So facing truth needs different ways to help people approach it. And I felt that Story, in this case, symbolizing the arts. The arts are able to tell us the truth, to help us face it, and also to find meaning. Art is the most direct way that I know. Beauty is the most, at least in my life, the most important way that I know to confront the difficulties of life and to find beauty in ugliness, to find medicine in the woundedness. This is nothing new. Traditional societies had known this. And I think that traditional societies know this because they had been so connected to nature. The modern societies have forgotten that. For over 300 years, since the Industrial Revolution, we had lived in this delusion that we are different than nature. So in this moment, we are going through a very amazing, unprecedented experience with COVID-19. It is as if the immune system of the earth is giving us an incredible opportunity. It's telling us to stop, to look at what we're doing, to see how we are walking towards the abyss, and to reflect on the ways we are living our lives. 5 months ago, if I had said that there would be no planes flying, that there would be 4 billion people staying in their homes, that we will stop factories, etc., I would have been probably put in a madhouse. It is incredible, this opportunity, to see what we're doing, with war, the war with ourselves, the war with our fellow men and women, but especially the war with nature. We have transformed the mother into an object, an object from which we extract things, we transform them into objects, and then we trash them. I am 60 years old, and in 60 years, my soul has witnessed the disappearance of 54% of the living beings. And there are many disappearing today, almost 200 every day. So we had this chance. Somehow we are going through a kind of rite of passage. The world as we knew it, what we call normal, that was not normal to begin with, no longer exists. So we are in this moment of transition, going through the threshold. We are in what in rites of passage is called the liminal stage. It's liminal because we don't know where we're going. But we know that we're going towards a world that doesn't exist yet. And a world that is coming through us if we're open. It's hard to be open when we feel traumatized. In moments like this of crisis, most of us go into trauma. Most of us want to grasp the things that we know. Most of us want to go back to what we think we know. But we had to let go of that. Somehow art is always in that place. Art is in the place of liminality. Art that when you are creating, you don't know where you're going. You don't know what is going to emerge. All you know is that you show up and you do the work. For the last 20 years, I have been doing theater mostly with people who had never done theater before, except telling lies every day. When we tell a lie, we act. Marlon Brando was the one who said that. But I invite them not only to act, but to act inspired by their stories, which is what they know. And they are able to do it. And they're some in a more aesthetic way than others, but we are able to communicate, to use theater to communicate, to put our souls in action, to ask questions, difficult questions, to make ourselves vulnerable, to say we don't know what to do. I think that we are in that moment, that the leadership that we need in this moment is a leadership from a place of vulnerability, from a place of not knowing. Can you imagine if our leaders will, instead of pretending to know what to do, is to use masks or not, is to blame some other people for what's happening, but to say, I really don't know what's happening. I really don't know how to resolve what's happening today in the world. We really don't know what we're going to do with the climate crisis, which is a huge wave that is coming, bigger than COVID-19, because it's affecting all of the living beings, or all of the beings of the earth, or the economic crisis that is coming because of this. So we don't know. Art is the place where we ask questions and where we give birth to the new world, to that which is not here yet. And in that way, or for that reason, I think that art is a place of healing. And when we don't heal, we kill. The human psyche, like the psyche of societies, I guess, is condemned to repetition when we don't do the healing. And for that reason, I feel that art is crucial when we're dealing with conflict and when we want to find the alternatives, the real alternatives, not from places of knowing, but from places of wanting to confront mystery, wanting to confront the future, allowing the future to come through us and to be present. Is our way to participate in the ongoing creation of life. So that's our invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hector. You're absolutely hypnotic to listen to. There's a million questions I could ask you, but I'm only allowed to ask you one. And the one that I want to know, the answer that I want to know is, when you were here in Northern Ireland and you were working with the Playhouse, you said it was a training for you and that you were able to bring that back to your work in Colombia. Can you sum that up for us and tell me how it manifested?
What I will always be filled with appreciation about the experience I had with the Playhouse during the 9 residencies that I was able to do is that in each residency I was not just alone doing the work. The Playhouse allowed me to invite internationals and people from Northern Ireland who were interested in learning how to use the techniques of Augusto Boal in working with the communities and creating dialogue. And sometimes we will go into the community and work for an hour or two, and then spend 20 hours processing. Because doing a play in the community is not just about doing games and then doing exercises and creating characters and doing improvisations and doing that kind of theatrical things, but it was also about creating connections. It was also about processing the stories that people brought. It was mostly about processing our own personal stories, because when you, for example, when you work with young people, they move your floor. You enter the room and boom, all of a sudden darts just start falling into you, exactly in the place where you're wounded. Your sexuality, your insecurity, the fact that you were bullied or you were a bully, that you were popular or not popular, all those things will come to you as a practitioner. And in the work that we did, we were able to process all of that. So it was a lot about me discovering why I teach what I teach or why I do what I do. Not for the interns to do it as I do, because no, I want them to do it, and they can only do it as they do it. I don't do things as Augusto Boal. I will not do a theater of witness play as Thea Sepinuk does it. Only Thea does it the way she does it, and every other director. But we learn from each other. And once we are with the people also co-create with us. All we need to do is to become vessels for that which wants to come out. So definitely for me, in my personal story, and especially the story of my work as an artist, my experience with the Playhouse in Northern Ireland was crucial, and it informs a lot the work that I'm doing right now in Colombia. And what I hope is that eventually we can bring this together. There has been such an investment, a social investment, in this small place called Northern Ireland, where the Troubles did a great deal of damage, but there has been a lot of investment in how to create dialogue, how to create peace. We, in the rest of the world, we are looking forward to learning from what you have done all these years. And I think this summit, this encounter, is about that, about exchanging how we can learn from each other.
Hector, thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting listening to you. That was Hector Aristizbal. I want to end this session now, and the person coming after me is Anthony Russell, and he's going to be talking about conference reflections. Thank you.